So, okay. Well, welcome back, everybody. It's 3:40, and we have one more topic for discussion today to wrap up our meeting for this afternoon. We're going to have an offshore wind update behind tab 9, and Julia is going to kick this off, and I see Brian Hooker is going to possibly be presenting some information to us as well. So I'll turn to Julia first, and then maybe she can introduce Brian from BOEM. Go ahead, Julia.
Sure. Well, hello again, everybody. So I don't have any slides or anything for any part of this presentation, but just to kind of give you the outline of what this whole agenda item is going to cover. We have a lot of presenters lined up to provide different sorts of information on offshore wind energy development in this region. So first we have Brian Hooker from BOEM is going to give an update kind of related to BOEM and the permitting process, kind of like the big picture regional updates from BOEM's perspective. And then after that, Pete Burns will be back for an update for Gartho from kind of the NOAA fisheries side of things for updates related to wind. And then we have presenters from offshore wind developers on 3 specific projects. So the first project is Vineyard Wind, and Krista Bank will be presenting. We thought it would be important to provide an update on this project specifically because you're probably aware that this is the first large-scale commercial project in federal waters to gain approval from BOEM. So that's why we selected that project for this meeting. And then also the South Fork Wind project will be next. So that's an Ørsted project, and Chris Serro will be presenting on that. That's kind of the next in line in terms of the permitting process. So that one's east of Montauk. And then the last project that we'll get a presentation on is the Ocean Wind project off of New Jersey. And Kara Gross from Ørsted will be presenting on that. And we chose that one for this meeting because it's one of the Mid-Atlantic projects that's further along. So what I told the presenters to all prepare for is each have about approximately 15 minutes or less per presentation. And then I was envisioning that at the end, there would be plenty of time for a Q&A for all of the presentations combined. If we want to stick to the original plan, an hour and a half that we had scheduled for this, but I know we're a little bit behind schedule. So I think it's up to you, Mr. Chair, if you want to pause in between presentations for a few quick questions. But the way we kind of set it up is that we were envisioning having a good chunk of time at the end for questions on everything combined. And there's no council action on any of this needed today. This is just meant to be updates and an opportunity for questions and discussions.
Yeah, thanks, Julia. I think given that we were a little over schedule, let's just have everyone run through their presentations. If the presenters can keep in mind time, not that I want to speed through it, but if there are things that we can highlight and then move on, what we'll do is we'll have everybody do their presentation and then have a question and answer period afterwards instead of stopping in between each one. I think that's going to be best for everybody. So we'll start with Brian, I guess, right? Brian's going to start first.
Sounds good.
All right, Brian, you're up.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, in the interest of time, the objective that we primarily had today from BOEM's perspective is to update you on the New York Bight leasing process, as we're very close to issuing a proposed sale notice. So I just wanted to make sure we gave you an update of where we were there. And let's see. There we go. So here's just a quick rundown of where we are. I think this is nothing new. Matter of fact, I think we need to update this slide, but I think we've had don't have any personnel that have been able to update some of these areas in New York call New York Bight call areas, for instance, are still on this map. But anyway, I think the focus of whatever I'd like to focus your attention on is that we do have 14 construction operations plans submitted. The Vineyard Wind one is included in that 14, which we did issue a record of decision on that, and we do anticipate 2 revised construction operations plans within the next 12 months. So that would bring us to a total of 16 projects that we're looking at. And then in addition, there's, the leasing under consideration is what I was going to talk about with New York Bight. And there's, as you can see, there's some other areas in the more southern end, South Atlantic area. We're considering some leasing down there as well. And of course, there's been recent announcements on leasing on the West Coast that are included in that 7. So I just wanted to remind everyone where we started. This is the wind energy areas that were announced earlier on in the year. And what's overlaid is the relative use index. If you recall, back in 2018, I think we presented this methodology of looking at the relative importance of each area based on revenue economic exposure, and then overlaying that, combining that with AIS data to try to present a more balanced heat map of where areas are in their relative importance. So that's the background for this map. Just to refresh your memory on where we've come from to this point. We first got a request from NYSERDA in New York back in 2017. In 2018 is when we had the call for information nominations. Continuing through 2018, we had a task force meeting on draft wind energy areas. And in March 2019, there was a workshop hosted by NYSERDA and ROTA, for New York Bight transit lanes. In December 2020, we got some revised analysis for Department of Defense avoidance areas. And in March of this year, as I mentioned, those wind energy areas were announced. And in April, just last month, or actually 2 months ago now, we had a task force meeting that kind of went through some of the slides that I'm going to present to you next with, what we're looking at in the actual proposed sale notice. And again, very soon to be published, proposed sale notice. So stay tuned for that. So where are we again in this whole leasing process? We are here with the leasing development process. We are very close to entering in that next proposed sale notice stage, which will be our next opportunity for public comment on those proposed sale areas and conditions of the leases that would be issued for this area. And then around that same time, we'll be doing an environmental assessment, but that's getting a little bit ahead of myself. So here's a slide on the environmental assessment. We will begin that process, concurrent with or just soon after the proposed sale notice process, and we'll be doing an EA and have an opportunity for public comment on that environmental assessment. Again, to contrast the proposed sale notice and the EA, proposed sale notice is on the actual sale for the development of a full offshore wind facility. The environmental assessment just looks at activities that would occur between the issuance of a lease and the submittal of a plan, whether it be a site assessment plan or a construction and operations plan. So it really just looks at the effects of the activities to support a plan submittal, including biological, geophysical, and geotechnical surveys, and then also the deployment of meteorological buoys, which are technically the site assessment activity itself. So we did have a scoping comment period that ended on April 28th. And again, as I mentioned, we'll have a comment period on the EA that will be that will begin once that notice of availability is published. So here's some of the contents in the proposed sale notice. It will be the area for leasing, the fiscal terms, the auction details and format, proposed lease terms. And again, I think that's an area that you might be interested in. And I'll get to more detail on that in a minute. You know, companies' legal qualifications and the auction, again, more of the training for how the auction works. So here's what we're looking at for the proposed sale notice. These are the areas, if you recall from that first slide I showed you with the fairways north and south, those areas have been removed for consideration at this time. And that's leaving the darker green areas of Hudson North, Central Bight, and then the areas in Hudson South, which are divided into A through E, excuse me, A through F, down there on the bottom. It's about 627,000 acres. Again, this is a reduction of over 900,000 acres from the call area that was originally announced. And there you have the amount of gigawatts and the homes that could be potentially powered if each of these lease areas were fully built out. So just we are aware of some outstanding conflicts between a proposed tug and tow lane with that Hudson North. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but there's a proposed lane that's supposed to potentially go through here that we're still, but it could be to the north or to the, or excuse me, could be moved a little bit to the south. Anyway, that's one issue that's still being worked out. And then there's some military training, DoD, that overlaps with lease area A. Going back to that NYSERDA workshop I mentioned, you saw that in the last slides, I did have some transit areas that were in that Hudson South area. And I just want to provide a little bit more background on how those areas were developed. So again, this workshop was back in June last year, about a year from this month. This is the best data that is available. I know there's some people that don't feel that it was a true consensus on on the transit lanes, but it is the best information that we had available to inform potential transit routes through the wind energy areas. Right now, there in the proposed sale notice, we're looking at a 2.44 nautical mile wide transit corridor. And that's based upon a lot of guidance that was received from Europe. And then in some areas of overlap, which you'll see on the next slide, there will be a no surface occupancy requirement. So what I'm referring to here is the blue line. You'll notice is the actual 2.44 nautical miles, but it does overlap with some portion of the aliquot leases, and where that overlap occurs, there would be no surface occupancy allowed. So no turbines would be allowed to be built in that area where the 2.44 nautical miles overlaps with a corner of a portion of a lease block. So some more information about how we divided up that Hudson South area. It is roughly equal size for commercial viability. Again, it includes the transit lanes, and tried to find a way to lay it out in a manner to reduce wake effects and facilitates a fair return on the government. Again, I think we're just trying to present like there's multiple factors that had to be weighed in trying to figure out the orientation, the transit, how the transit lanes fit through and have viable lease areas that can meet the demand that we're trying to accomplish. Okay. Again, here's some more of our environmental milestones. So as I mentioned, there's the environmental assessment will follow very soon on the heels of the proposed sale notice. So that target date is July 2021, so next month. There will be a comment period on that. And then a final EA with a FONSI is scheduled for September timeframe. Again, as I mentioned, the PSN will be published very soon. And that will have a 60-day comment period associated with that. So that will run through August. And then that will be followed by a final sale notice. And we're looking at an actual sale in late 2021 or early 2022. So here's specifically getting down to some things that I think the council would be interested in looking at when the proposed sale notice is published. Looking at, potentially providing comment on the number, size, orientation, and location of the proposed lease areas. The transit corridors. We have in there some lease conditions regarding coordination with other ocean users. And again, specifically a lease stipulation that would require lessees to provide some annual progress reports on reporting on the engagement with fisheries. Again, we already have a fisheries communication plan that is a part of that, but this would be kind of reporting out more regularly on how effective that fisheries and implementing that fisheries communication plan would be occurring. And then lastly, requesting a comment on prescribed layout. Should BOEM consider prescribing uniform and aligned turbine layouts into lease areas, especially in contiguous lease areas like we have with the Hudson South area. So before I conclude, I did want to update. I know there's been some questions regarding environmental studies recently. So just to remind you, BOEM does have an environmental studies program. We actually very soon will be having convening our standing committee in offshore science and assessment to discuss our study development, our studies to be executed in 2023. Oh no, 2022. Excuse me, getting too far ahead of myself. And that we take the results of these studies and incorporate it into the environmental assessment and decision-making process. One study that I think this council will be interested in was our hydrodynamic modeling study. This should be published very soon. The final report's in it. It's just undergoing some final review. This one was focused on the southern New England area, but I think because that was a high priority for where we have those contiguous areas. What we have here is all the tasks that were included, but I draw your attention to, we did model 3 different particles or larvae for Atlantic sea scallops, silver hake, and summer flounder, and then model those with 4 different offshore wind farm scenarios. And as I mentioned, that report is imminent, and I know there's also an interest in doing something similar to this in the Mid-Atlantic. So I think that's something that we're considering for the next round of projects. Other studies I just want to highlight is we have done all the telemetry reports that were all focused on the Mid-Atlantic, basically from New York to Virginia. Have been published, with the exception of the Virginia one that is in the report writing phase right now, but that includes New York, Delaware, and Maryland. Those reports are on our website. We also have in the final writing of the first phase of our black sea bass and squid report, now looking at the effects of pile driving on black sea bass and squid behaviors. There has been some published papers that have come out of that already. And then part 2 is just getting underway. That's going to be more in situ studies, like actually out in the field, looking at some of the behavior reactions from actual pile driving. Also, some council members may be aware we have a surf clam economic impact model that we're working on. That was originally, I think, funded through SCIMFIS, and now that we're working with Rutgers, Daphne Monroe, and doing a more explicit model for offshore wind and surf clam, the surf clam fishery. And I think there's actually even a follow-on now that the Atlantic Shores project is funding separately from BOEM's project. And then lastly, I want to mention that the NIMS bottom trawl survey observation system simulation experiment, you may have gotten some comments from, you may be aware of this already from just hearing from NIMS, but where the latest timeline for the first workshop on that is going to be this fall. I think we're looking at September of this year for the first workshop that will come out of that survey adaptation study. And that concludes my slides. I'm happy to stay on after everybody else is done to answer any questions. Thank you for your time. My contact information is there. Always feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Yeah, if you're okay with sticking around for a little bit, I was hoping to go through the different presentations and then come back to questions. But if you're okay with hanging out for a few more minutes, that would be helpful.
Can do.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to go back to Julia. Who do we have next up on the presentation list?
I just made Pete Burns a presenter. Sorry, Julia.
Thank you. I'll share my screen now with you.
Okay.
Was that Pete Burns?
Yeah, sorry.
Yes.
I think Julia and I were talking at the same time.
Yeah, you guys were crossing over each other.
All right.
Yeah, welcome, Pete. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll look forward to your presentation. Whenever you're ready, you can get
Terrific.
started.
Can you see it?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks, everybody. Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I'm Pete Burns. I'm the chief of our ecosystem management branch in our habitat division at GARFO, and our branch supports our offshore wind activities. And today I'm here to give you an update on what we've been working on. As you know, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management is a lead agency for all offshore wind projects. And for the most part, NOAA Fisheries is a cooperating agency, and we provide recommendations and consultations under the ESA and for EFH to help understand and minimize the environmental impacts of these projects. And our Habitat and Ecosystem Services Division coordinates the reviews in the region, and our approach is to engage early and often with BOEM throughout the process to ensure that we have the information we need to provide the effective recommendations in the consultations on offshore wind projects. Sorry, I forgot to advance my slide. Just some recent activities that we've been working on, just to give the council an update. We've been busy with offshore wind lately. As you know, it's a high priority for the new administration. As Brian mentioned in his at the beginning of his presentation, there was a lot of projects that are going to be rolling through for environmental review in the coming months. Last week, we completed an essential fish habitat consultation and provided conservation recommendations on the South Fork Wind Farm, which is located on Cox's Ledge, south of Rhode Island. As you know, the COPs, or the construction and operations plans, are the comprehensive plans that the developers provide to BOEM that really lay out the whole plan for the project, from the baseline surveys at the beginning to the decommissioning of the project at the end. We provided scoping comments at the response of the notice of intent, which starts the NEPA process review. We provided those comments for two projects over the last 30 days for Revolution Wind and for Ocean Wind. And Revolution Wind is off the coast of Massachusetts, and Ocean Wind off the coast of New Jersey. We were also participating in the project kickoff meetings that are held by the developers and BOEM. We've set in on one for Empire Wind off the coast of New York, Park City, which is south of Massachusetts, and Atlantic Shores off the coast of New Jersey. And from what Brian just mentioned, it looks like we'll be taking a look too at the New York Bight project and layout that BOEM is going to have coming out soon. We're also working with BOEM to look at project timelines and concur on those timelines as these new projects start to take shape and come out into the public realm. So as you can expect, with a lot of projects coming in over the next several months, that creates some challenges for us as an agency. We support certainly the administration's efforts to develop and promote sustainable offshore energy. But of course, we have our job to do too, to provide our consultations and to help do the analyses and review the plans to make sure that we have our opportunity to provide recommendations on how to mitigate impacts to marine resources and coastal communities. So with all these projects coming out in a short period of time, that creates a challenge for us under the existing resources that we have in place. And of course, there's expedited timelines. Once the notices of intent are issued, the record of decision in the whole NEPA process has to be done within a 2-year timeline. So that's a challenge to get those reviews done, not only for NOAA Fisheries and the other cooperating agencies, but also I'm sure for BOEM as well. And as you can see, we've had 2 projects that rolled out fairly close to each other with the NOIs and the scoping that we did for Revolution Wind and Ocean Wind. So we know that down the line, we're going to have simultaneous and overlapping consultations, at least for those projects, and possibly for other ones in the future. So that's going to provide a challenge for us to be able to have the resources to be able to provide the quality recommendations and consultations that we've done in the past. Sometimes we don't always get a chance to look at the construction and operation plans before they come out. And in some cases, if they're not complete or if new or updated information comes in after the fact and we've already started either our EIS review or our consultations, that can complicate our ability to keep within timelines, required timelines and milestones, and provide our consultations in an effective way. And at the same time, we're working closely internally to try to align our resources in an effective and efficient way to be able to handle the workload that's coming. And so with that, we're trying to take some proactive work to try to take what we've learned so far and put that into action and work smarter and more cooperatively to review and consult on wind projects. So we developed some different strategies to be able to try to do that and help us to be able to work more effectively and provide information to the developers and to BOEM in a way that can help them provide more comprehensive assessments and NEPA documents and things like that that come to us and become the basis for our EFH consultations and our Endangered Species Act consultations, et cetera. So some of those things are we have published benthic fish habitat mapping recommendations, and these were intended to augment what BOEM already has in place to set forth some of the techniques and strategies for mapping benthic fish habitat that can be used in the EFH assessments that BOEM and the developers provide to us that form the basis for our EFH consultations and our conservation recommendations to help mitigate impacts to benthic fish habitat. We've also developed checklists to guide these EFH assessments and also the biological assessments that the developers and BOEM put together to help with our ESA consultations and also socioeconomic analyses for the NEPA documents. So these checklists are in place. We've provided them to BOEM to be able to use as a guide on what we believe is the sufficient level of information and analysis that comes in these assessments that they provide to us so that we can more effectively and efficiently be able to use that information to provide our consultations and our recommendations. We continue to work with BOEM on the staff level to provide information and analyses to support their NEPA analyses and their EFH and their ESA assessments. So that's an ongoing thing. We work with them directly to try to augment what's there and make sure we have the right information that we need to be able to do our job. And we're also looking at templates for documents. We've been working with BOEM on this for quite a while now. So certain things like purpose and need statements and potentially annotated outlines for the environmental impact statements and things, ways that we can try to streamline and make templates for these documents so that we're not reinventing the wheel every time. And when projects come through, we can keep that consistent between projects and not have to go back and wordsmith each time. And with the process as well to help facilitate the information exchange. And I'll talk about that a little bit more now. We have several things that are available online. We have an offshore wind socioeconomic impact summary report. Those are standardized reports that have socioeconomic information on there on fishing operations and for each wind project area. So those are available. Developers and BOEM can go in there, and the public can go in and access those reports to get information to help with those socioeconomic impact analyses. And we also have a socioeconomic data query tool that provides commercial fishing trip data, and this information was used to populate the summary reports. So there's good information there to help inform that process. And we've done this within our regional office staff and also in cooperation with our Northeast Fisheries Science Center. There's a Stock Smart tool, and that provides species-based stock assessment results that can be accessed to help get information on fish activity and fish behavior and things like that that can be used to help inform analyses and NEPA and other assessments. We also have an essential fish habitat mapper. And this is a spatial mapper that provides spatial representations of fish species at all the different life stages and important habitats. And then finally, there's the, I'm sure the folks in the council are familiar with the the Northeast Regional Ocean Council and the Mid-Atlantic Regional Ocean Council data portals that each have a whole host of information that's available for people to access. And in particular, there's fish habitat and distribution data and fisheries data and maps based on our vessel trip report and VMS data. So the point here is to be able to take steps to be able to work with BOEM to provide BOEM and the developers with tools that will ensure that we have the best available information that's able to be accessed easily in a consistent way across projects. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Peter, thank you very much for your presentation. Let me ask Julia, do we have two more presentations, both from Vineyard Wind and Ørsted? Is that the plan?
There's two separate Ørsted presentations because we gave them time for a presentation on two separate projects. So there's basically three more presentations. So
Okay.
quite a bit more to go through.
Okay. Let's go ahead and work through those, and then we'll take questions and comments from Peter. Are you going to be able to stick around for a little bit?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, sure. I'll be happy to answer questions at the end of the program.
I appreciate that. I just think it's better if we just get all the updates and then allow council members to ask questions and provide comment based on all the different updates. So I appreciate you spending the time with us this afternoon. So let's go ahead to the Vineyard Wind presentation.
Hi, Krista's here. Can you hear me?
Krista, we can hear you just fine. Thanks for being here with us today.
Sure. Thank you to the council for letting me present today. I'm just trying to make sure I have the right screen. I think I'm sharing the wrong one. So if you're
sharing a screen that looks like it's a preview screen.
Right. I'm trying to see if I can share.
Slide. Yeah, just we'll get it right.
Okay. Let me see if I can share screen 2. How's that?
That looks better.
Okay. Now let me just make sure I can advance.
Yeah, whenever you want to get started, go ahead. Thank you, Krista.
Thank you. Again, thank you for letting me present this afternoon. My name is Krista Bank, and I'm the fishery liaison with Vineyard Wind. I'll be going through today some Vineyard Wind project details, including the compensatory mitigation plans for this project. As Julia mentioned earlier, we just got our record of decision to go forward with this project. We'll also cover some of the fishery science and cable monitoring plans associated with this, and then touch on some potential fishing vessel and fisherman opportunities to get involved in the project. And then we'll discuss some of our outreach strategies and end with future development in the lease area. So the Vineyard Wind 1 project will produce 800 megawatts of electricity for Massachusetts. If you look at the image to the right, the turbines are located in the northern portion of this lease area. The cable corridor extends north through Muskeget Channel and lands on the Cape, Muskeget Channel, excuse me. The construction staging will be based in New Bedford, and the long-term operations and maintenance will be based on Martha's Vineyard. If you look at the timeline to the left, as you can see, the construction and operation plan was originally submitted in December of 2017. And then there were some different reviews to the environmental impact statement, culminating with the final environmental impact statement being released in March of this year. And like we mentioned, the record of decision was just issued. So during that time frame, there's been some notable changes to the project, specifically the layout. So the spacing between the turbines have increased to a 1x1 nautical mile spacing, aligned in north-south, east-west grid layout. With the 13 megawatt turbine choice for this project, that has reduced the number of turbines needed to create the 800 megawatts of electricity to 62 turbines. And it's also reduced the overall footprint of the project. And we were able to eliminate a few of the turbines located in the northern corners, one notably on the 20 fathom curve. This is the high-level construction schedule plan, and you can see from the box I just put on the screen that the offshore construction will not start for another year. Right now, some onshore work is beginning. The first offshore construction activities will be the cable installation. That will start about a year from now, and the cable will be installed in different segments. In the actual lease area, the foundations and scour protection and monopile installation isn't scheduled to start until 2023. So there are compensatory mitigation plans for this project. The method used to develop them include using the best available data on fishing activity and fish revenues generated within the project area and the offshore export cable corridor. At the time the projects were developed, the best data that was available was the Livermore 2017 report through the state of Rhode Island. That data included fishing revenues from 2011 to 2016 and included VTR and VMS data. Currently, for future compensation mitigation plans going forward, the NOAA 2021 data is the most up to date, and it includes spans of years 2008 through 2019. In the methodology for these mitigation plans, we also had to adjust or increase some revenue for the lobster permit holders that do not have to submit VTR, so we had to increase or adjust for those permit holders to estimate the revenue from those fisheries. Some other estimates that are in this plan include economic exposure by state from the project area. And the definition of that is the value of the fish landed from the project area, meaning there aren't any deductions from that economic value from all those fish, whereas the direct economic impact deducts costs associated with fishing, such as spending money on fuel, ice, and crew. Also incorporated into the plan are indirect economic impacts to shoreside businesses. So those are the effects that could be felt from upstream businesses, which means the guys you buy fuel from, ice, equipment, and supplies. And then the downstream indirect economic impacts have to do with the shoreside processing plants and distributions. So for the plans that were developed, you can see on the right here, taking those annual landings by state for this project area. And again, we're just talking about that northern project area. Massachusetts had the most landings, a little over 50%. Rhode Island was next at 37%. And then New York, Connecticut, and Jersey landings were estimated at less than 5%. So the compensatory mitigation plans were done through the state processes, which is established through the Coastal Zone Management Act Federal Consistency Review process. And then New York, New Jersey, that we do still have a fund for those states, even though they didn't have the Federal Consistency Review process, but the same methods that I just discussed were used to develop that fund. So the fund summary here, for Massachusetts, there's 19 million in direct compensation funds and 1.75 million for a fisheries innovation fund. If there aren't enough claims to claim in the direct compensation fund, any leftover money will roll into the fisheries innovation fund. In Rhode Island, it's 4.2 million in direct compensation funds and 12.5 million in the Fishermen's Future Viability Trust. And the same issue, if there's more money left over in the direct compensation fund, it will roll into the Fishermen's Future Viability Trust. And the fund set up for Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey is 3.3 million in direct compensation funds. So for going on to the fishery surveys, we're monitoring the impact of offshore wind on the fisheries, and the approach to do this is through different fishery surveys, a trawl survey, a drop camera survey, and a ventless trap survey coupled with a plankton survey. All of these surveys are designed using the before and after control impact study, which means that you take data in the impact area, again, which is in the north, and then you find a control area of the same area, same dimensions, and preferably of the same depth and habitat characteristics. So you take samples within the impact area and the control area, and then you monitor the change from before construction to after. So the trawl survey occurs 4 times a year, and that's looking at species distribution and abundance for finfish species. The drop camera survey happens twice a year, looking at species distribution and abundance for macroinvertebrates. And the ventless trap survey looks at species distribution and abundance for lobster, Jonah crab, and also data is taken on black sea bass. And again, like the plankton survey is coupled with that as well. So the ventless trap survey starts in mid-May and continues through October, and traps are sampled twice a month. During the 2 years that we've been conducting these studies, 9 fishing vessels have participated in the project, and we anticipate the same vessels continuing the studies for the next few years. We've also partnered with the New England Aquarium to try to document the presence and absence of highly migratory species, not just in the Vineyard Wind Lease area, but the entire Rhode Island, Massachusetts wind energy area. So there were 2 approaches to do this. One approach was to mine through some data sets as to where highly migratory species were caught. One data set included the conventional tagging data. So they looked through decades of data to see where they were caught, what species they were, where they were, and the different fishing. You can see the names on the chart here, the different fishing hotspots here for recreational community. The other data set that they used is a large pelagic survey data, again, looking for where fishermen were targeting the species, what recreational areas they were going to. So that's kind of a data mining part of it. Then there was a survey that was done online targeting recreational fishermen to give feedback on their hotspots where they go to fish, how many times a year they fish there, what species they target, and what type of gear they use to target them. And that's the image you're seeing on the right is the result from that survey. So each survey represents the number of days that the recreational community said that they were targeting certain species in these areas. So all of these surveys, the reports for these are up on our website. The website is right at the top of the screen here. And just recently over the spring, the SMAS, the School for Marine Science and Technology, has been leading a review of these monitoring plans. And the review process has included both a fisherman review process and a peer-reviewed scientific review. The fisherman review process was where we asked lobster fishermen and trawl fishermen and recreational fishermen and scallop fishermen to review each one of the, the reports for their fishery, and then provided feedback on what they thought was working well and what we should focus on to improve them. And then the academic reviewers read all the reports and offered their feedback, more statistical feedback and analysis on the reports and how they can be improved in the future. And then just last week, SNAPS again held a virtual meeting online for the general public, but geared towards fishermen, to review all the monitoring plans, the results to date, and to summarize the review group results. The presentation is available on our website as well as the recording to that meeting. So this link here should be active and you can access it through there. And then for the fishery surveys plan going forward, we're conducting our third year of pre-construction data. During those 2 years of construction, we're going to still try to get a solid year of data to encompass each season during those 2 years of construction. And then there'll be 3 years of post-construction data collected. And then we're still, have some plans with the New England Aquarium to set up an acoustic receivers as part of an array of regional acoustic array design in the wind energy area to keep track of the presence and absence of the highly migratory species, and there will be a tagging component to that as well. For the cable monitoring plans, there's a benthic habitat monitoring plan that will be conducted pre and post cable installation, basically looking to see if there's any impact or changes to the benthic habitat along the cable corridor and in areas in the lease area. There's also a eelgrass survey that's planned off of Martha's Vineyard. I don't know if you can see my mouse moving around, but it's right on the tip here. That's Cape Pogue. There's some eelgrass beds there, so we'll be surveying them this summer and then again after construction to see if they've been impacted by any of the cable laying activities. And then for the cable burial itself, the projected depth that we want to get with burials between 5 to 8 feet. So after installation, there'll be geophysical surveys along the entire cable corridor to compare the bathymetry data, see if there's any changes in the seafloor information. And also the cable temperature will be monitored constantly because changes in temperature to the cable could indicate that there might be changes in the burial depth of the cable. There will also be some monitoring of the electromagnetic fields. So when the cable is running at full capacity, there'll be measurements of the electromagnetic fields, and we will capture those measurements and then ground truth the model outputs that are used to estimate what the EMF fields are from this type of cable. That should be buried, like I said, to 5 to 8 feet. And there should be some potential opportunities for local fishing vessels to be used as research platforms for some of these surveys. So during our geological surveys, we have been conducting offshore. So starting last year, we had fishermen go on board our geophysical and geotechnical surveys to help with communication. So they were deployed on the surveys all season. They helped the survey captains to document where fixed fishing gear was and help the survey captains understand how gear was set and how to work around it. Last year, we had 10 fishermen on 6 different survey vessels, and we'll be doing that again this season coming up. We'll also be utilizing scout vessels this year. We didn't do that in the past, but we'll be having a fishing vessel work ahead of the survey vessel, again, documenting where fixed gear is and communicating with fishermen that are working in the area to what's going on out there. And because of these potential opportunities, we have put up on our website a request for information it's geared towards the commercial and the recreational fleet to see if they have some interest in participating in some of these potential opportunities. So it's an online fillable form where you can talk about your vessel capabilities, size, horsepower, you have an A-frame, things like that, and any type of safety certifications or Coast Guard licenses and things like that. So if you are interested, you can fill that out on our website. A phone call will follow up to talk about some of these potential opportunities and your interests. And then we are always trying to improve our fisheries outreach. There's many different channels to to try to improve outreach with the fishing community, but one method that we use is fishing representatives. And they're basically independent fishermen organizations that represent their own fisheries interest in their ports, not the interests of Vineyard Wind. And it's been a positive way to open up a two-way communication between what's going on in the offshore wind world and the issues and concerns from the fishing industry. So these are some of the organizations as our fishing representatives, and we found the communication to be really beneficial. And then we're still always trying to be out in public. Now that hopefully COVID is on its way out, we can start to be out more frequently. The fishery liaisons from the Mass Rhode Island wind energy area, we try to get together once a month for monthly port hours, so we're all in one place at one time to talk with anybody that has questions or concerns. Every month we do New Bedford and Point Judith. We're hoping to expand to Montauk as well. And we have a fisheries email network where we send out notice to mariners about the activity going on offshore and updates on the fisheries science and research. This email here was informing everybody about the virtual meeting we had with SMAS last week. And then on to future development for the lease area. So as you can see in the image here, the Vineyard Wind 1 project is up in the north. The Vineyard Wind South project is the rest of the lease area south of there. This development is in 2 phases. So the maximum that would be developed down here would be 130 turbines and up to 5 electric service platforms at the most. The first phase is a project called Park City Wind, and we have a power purchase agreement with the state of Connecticut to produce 804 megawatts of electricity. The second phase, we don't have power purchase agreement for any future project yet, but this is all still part of the construction operation plan that was submitted in June of 2020. We're anticipating at the end of the month that BOEM will issue a notice of intent to prepare the environmental impact statement. And once they do that, then there should be some public hearings, which would be the first time to be able to comment on the potential future development for Vineyard Wind South. Each project does have its own project design envelope, which basically means there's a range of different turbines that could be used, scour protection, all different types of, there's basically a range, so you're not committed to choosing just one turbine or one project approach. So each one will have its own project design envelope. And the offshore export cables for these projects, there would be at the most 5 offshore export cables that would fall within the same cable corridor that's being used for Vineyard Wind 1. So you can see on the image here. And that's all I have for now. Again, my name's Krista Bank. I'm located in New Bedford, and Kayla Howard is another fishery liaison with Vineyard Wind. She's located in Connecticut. Please reach out to us at any time. And if you're interested in signing up for the fisheries email updates, you can get them through email, or you can sign up for text alerts, and our website is posted there. So thank you again for the opportunity to talk to everybody today, and I will be here for questions at the end. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Krista. Appreciate your presentation. I'm sure there's going to be questions, but as I stated earlier, we're going to hold off on that until all the presentations are made, and then we'll have a question and answer period before we break for the day. So hopefully you can stick around for just a few more minutes. We have 2 more presentations from Ørsted, and I'll look to Julia to help guide that.
So I believe first Ross Pearsall is going to give a quick intro, and then Chris Serro is going to present on South Fork.
Okay.
Yep, that's correct. You guys hear me?
Yep, we hear you.
And then hopefully I got this right. All right, in the interest of time, I'm just gonna fly through this. Thank you very much for having us today. My name's Ross Pearsall. I'm the Fisheries Relations Manager for Ørsted. And before Chris and Kara go, giving project-specific updates, I'm just gonna give you a brief update on our Fisheries Outreach. as you can see here, Ørsted's fisheries outreach policy revolves around promoting the smart growth of the American offshore wind industry, maintaining access and navigation in and around wind farms for all ocean users, incorporating collaborative scientific research, and then finally being accessible and available for our stakeholders. And in order to carry out that philosophy, Ørsted's assembled the largest marine affairs team in the industry, which includes 2 marine affairs managers, 1 for the Northeast and 1 for the Mid-Atlantic, 4 fisheries liaisons covering each state that we're present in, plus myself and the head of marine affairs, and then also marine affairs coordinator. And we all work specifically on fisheries issues and navigation. And also to further our philosophy, we've developed this, the Fisheries Communication and Outreach Plan, which I've put 4 bullet points together, but I would strongly advise anyone who would care to read it. It's posted on our website, us.orsted.com/mariners. It's about a 9-page document that lays out a framework about how we do things at different times in development and construction and decommissioning. It's updated from time to time, so the most current version is always on our website, and it really is a great document that shows our commitment to fisheries stakeholders of all sorts. And since 2017, since Ørsted has been around, we've really developed our commitment to our stakeholders by getting out into the community and speaking with them. This is just a really high level idea of what we've been able to achieve, specifically in the last 2 years. And even so, even because of COVID, we've been able to do some neat things with like webinars, hosting online surveys, and really keeping our efforts alive despite the fact that we haven't been able to get out on the docks. Speaking of getting out on the docks, we've just been cleared, I think, as Krista mentioned a little bit ago, that we'll be resuming in-person outreach effective last week. So we really look forward to seeing people again. And finally, just another quick little idea of how we're incorporating the feedback that we get from outreach. It's led to things like the uniform grid spacing, altered cable landings, and onboard fisheries representatives. Those are some really key things that we've seen that have gone towards achieving coexistence. And finally, I just wanted to point out our efforts to develop a fishing simulator, both at my tags in Baltimore and at USMRC in Maryland. We've had about 40 or 50 fishermen come through. We've been getting good feedback as we bring more people in. I believe we posted a notice, or the council posted a notice for us looking for expressions of interest from any fishery stakeholder, and we've been getting them. So thank you for doing that. And as I hand it off to Chris and Kara, I will also be around for questions at the end. So that's all I have. Thank you again.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. Appreciate your opening. Let's go ahead. Who's going to go first? Is it Chris or Kara?
Chris will be up next.
Chris will be up next. Okay. So whenever you're ready, Chris.
All right. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. You sound good.
Okay. Let me just share my screen. And can everyone see the presentation?
I can't see it yet.
Not at all.
It might take a second to come on, but I don't see anything yet.
Okay, hang on one second. Let me try this again. Share screen 2, share.
There we go.
Okay, how about now?
There we go. Yep.
All right, perfect.
See it now. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm Chris Saro. I'm the fisheries liaison for Massachusetts, Rhode Island for Ørsted. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I'll be giving an update on the South Fork wind farm. So just to start, South Fork is actually a collaboration between Ørsted and Eversource. It's two separate companies working together for a common goal. Just some basic project overviews. It's a 50-50 joint venture with Eversource. It's approximately 132 megawatt project that'll be about 35 miles east of Montauk Point. It's going to consist of 12 turbines, 1 offshore substation, and will supply power for about 70,000 homes on Long Island. It's going to tie into a substation in East Hampton, and we expect commercial operations to begin sometime in 2023. Just for where the project is, it falls on the western end of the Massachusetts, Rhode Island wind energy area. You can see it here on the inside of the map, and will make landfall on Long Island. The lease area itself is about 13,700 acres, but the actual footprint of the permanent structures on the seafloor is only 32.5 acres. So about 0.25% of the lease area will have new permanent structures when construction is done. Just a bit of how we got to where we are. The construction and operations plan was originally submitted in June 2018. It was updated in May 2019, and then updated again in February 2020. The draft environmental impact statement was issued in January 2021, and we're expecting the final environmental impact statement some point later on this summer. Fisheries Outreach began in 2017, and that outreach has resulted in several project modifications. The big one I want to point out is the layout, and we've kind of how we've gone through the progression. So in 2018, we started with this layout here on the left. It was expanded in 2019, and then in 2020, we adopted the 1x1 nautical mile grid with the other developers in the Northeast across all lease areas. And then the final layout will actually look different than this because we reduced the number of turbines that we actually need. So I'm going to switch a little bit now and talk about the fisheries monitoring work that's being done. So we partnered with the Commercial Fisheries Research Foundation and University of Rhode Island for all the fisheries research, all of which will be done on local commercial fishing vessels. It consists of a gill net survey, a beam trawl survey, a ventless trap survey, a fish pot survey, and we're also supporting some acoustic telemetry work. So the beam trawl survey started in October of last year, and all the research is being conducted on the Mr. G. Beam trawl was selected just because of the lack of towable ground in South Fork that would make a traditional otter trawl survey impractical. It's an asymmetrical backy design, so there are 2 control areas and 1 impact area. Sampling will take place monthly at all 3 areas, and we're going to adopt an adaptive sampling approach. So the data from year 1 will be used to conduct a power analysis, and the results of that will inform sampling frequency and intensity going forward if needed. One thing to note that not just for the beam trawl, but for all of our survey work, we'll have temperature loggers on the gear, and we'll also be conducting CTD casts at all sample locations. Next is our gillnet survey, and that started last month. Research here will be conducted on the Kalen and Marin and the Moore Misery. This is focused primarily on monkfish and winter skate, which are 2 important fisheries in the area. It's also an asymmetrical backy design. We'll be sampling twice a month from April to June and October through December. We started a little late this year just because of delay in the exempted fishing permit. We'll again use an adaptive sampling approach, and one thing to note is that at the request of GARFO, we're using gill nets that have tags that have already been allocated to the fishery. So we're not introducing any more fishing gear into the area that's already been accounted for by the fishery. Our ventless trap survey also started last month, and research here will be conducted on the Erica Knight, Amelia Ann, and Ashley Ann 2. Again, asymmetrical vacuum design. Sampling will occur twice a month from May to November, and this builds on the previous Southern New England Cooperative Ventless Trap Survey that was conducted by URI and CFRF. We're fishing 10 trap trawls on 5 night soaks, which is consistent with local fishing practices. Biological sampling will be consistent with the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission protocols, and we're actually introducing a T-bar tagging component to address residency and seasonal movements in and around the study areas. And we're also conducting a fish pot survey that will begin this month. Research will be conducted on the harvest moon. This is a before-after gradient design, or a bag. Sampling will occur from June to December. We had originally scheduled sampling from April, October, but we shifted the sampling timeline based on concerns to marine mammals. And the idea behind this is to monitor species that associate to complex or hard bottoms that might not be sampled well with other deer types, so species like black sea bass, tautog, or scup. Sampling here will only take place inside the South Fork lease area, and as with the other components, we'll be using adaptive sampling to kind of adjust on the fly as needed based on the power analysis. And then finally, Ørsted has provided financial support to a couple of telemetry projects, one focusing on cod and the other one focusing on highly migratory species. Starting next year, we'll partner with the New England Aquarium and Inspire Environmental on a 5-year project focused on bluefin tuna, blue shark, and shortfin mako. These receivers will also pick up any tagged cod in the area, so that information will be shared with those research teams to help inform the work that they're doing. And this project really has 3 main goals. It's to study the changes in presence, residency, and movement before, during, and after construction, to study connectivity between the lease areas, and also to help monitor large-scale movements of highly migratory species beyond just our lease areas. So that's it from me. I'll be on to take any questions at the end, and I'll pass it over to Kara.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me just share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so as was mentioned, my name's Kara Gross, and I'm Ørsted's Mid-Atlantic Fisheries Liaison. Today, I'll be giving a brief overview of our Ocean Wind project, and I will try to be kind of quick with this in the interest of time. So Ocean Wind, which is seen in this illustration off the coast of southern New Jersey in the darker blue color, is a joint venture with PSEG, which is a New Jersey-based diversified energy company. The project was awarded by the New Jersey Board of Public Utilities about 2 years ago in efforts to meet the state's clean energy goals. The closest turbine is planned to be constructed about 15 miles off the coast of Atlantic City, and the wind farm will consist of up to 98 turbines to generate 1,100 megawatts of energy, which is enough to power up to 500,000 average homes. Commercial operations are expected at the end of 2024. As an update on the current status of the project within the federal Permitting process, as was touched on earlier, BOEM published the NOI to initiate the environmental impact study on March 30th of this year. And along with the NOI, BOEM also set an anticipated review schedule indicating that the draft environmental impact statement would be published May of 2022, and the final EIS will be out in February of 2023. This is the general layout of the wind farm, which you can see, which in this image is shaded light yellow with a blue border. There'll be 3 offshore substations constructed in that area among the turbines, from which 3 export cables will be buried under the seabed within 2 cable corridors that run to 2 points of interconnection on shore. The longer cable route extends north toward Oyster Creek in Lacey Township, and the shorter one runs kind of westward to BL England in Upper Township. And both of these are existing decommissioned power plants previously providing coal or nuclear energy, and Ocean Wind will construct 2 new onshore substations in their footprints. The onshore cable routes are still being refined in conjunction with local authorities, but the intent is to for that installation to utilize existing and disturbed rights of way as much as possible. To be well informed of environmental conditions and potential concerns with our wind farm project, Ocean Wind has collected, considered, and analyzed a generous amount of data, environmental data. One example of the data collection and analysis is the extensive geophysical survey work that we have conducted, and in which over a 2-year period, we have covered over 6,000 miles of survey lines in our lease area and along our cable routes. The equipment is used for determination of water depth, topography, and imaging of the seafloor. Geotechnical surveys have also been conducted, and these vessels will collect samples from the seafloor, which is used in the characterization of sediment and rock profiles. While we have vessels on the water, Marine Affairs, which is our group, sends out notice to mariners that provides details on where vessels will be working in the lease areas and along the cable routes. And we also work closely with local fishermen to try to avoid any conflicts while the vessels are active. These survey vessels also carry protected species observers who will notify the vessel of any marine mammals or sea turtles, for example, in proximity to the vessel, which may cause pauses in operations per regulatory guidelines. And the data the PSOs collect is utilized in other ways, such as monitoring species migration patterns. Ocean Wind has also undertaken numerous fisheries reviews utilizing many existing data sets, including the ones listed here, among which are state and federally sponsored fish and shellfish surveys. In this image to the right, the red cross-hatched areas are locations of designated prime fishing grounds around our lease area. And in the bottom right, you can see a zoomed in image of our lease area, which shows that there's very little overlap of these designated areas and where we plan to build. But all of those sites are taken into consideration with the turbine siting and cable route planning for avoidance. Ocean Wind has also considered numerous potential impacts to recreational and tourism industries like seabed disturbances, changes to bottom habitat, and noise from construction, just to name a few. Some mitigation measures that Ocean Wind will undertake to minimize these impacts include careful planning of the construction schedule and increased outreach to maritime communities in advance of and during construction. Further studies also suggest that there is no loss in tourism, and there was an increase in fishing recreational fishing around wind turbines, as evidenced as around our Black Island wind farm. Ocean Wind recognizes that a major concern with offshore wind development for maritime communities is safe navigation. This illustration provides a zoomed in view of the latest iteration of our turbine layout. It was developed with feedback from state and federal agencies and addresses stakeholder concerns for visual impacts and vessel navigation and operation within the wind farm. It utilizes a gridded layout with turbine spacing of 1 nautical mile by 0.8 nautical miles to provide clear lines for safe navigation through the wind farm that align with typical traffic patterns of fishing vessels from major fishing ports along the Jersey Shore. So that's what those lines in that image represent, those clear transit, lines of transit. In accordance to BOEM guidelines, a navigational risk assessment was performed in this layout, on the layout to identify hazards and propose mitigations for risks related to vessel navigation. It went through an extensive review process by BOEM and the U.S. Coast Guard and can be found in our construction and operations plan on BOEM's website in Appendix M. Also aiding in navigation, there are a couple different types of lighting that's required on our turbines during operation of the wind farm. The first is aircraft warning lights, which will be located at the top of each turbine. Oceanwind intends on incorporating aircraft detection and lighting system, which activates warning lights only when aircrafts are in the vicinity of the wind farm in low light and night visibility conditions. After studying the historical aircraft data related to Oceanwind, it was estimated that the lights will only be active for a total of a few hours over a 1-year period. In addition to the ADLS aircraft warning lights, there will be marine navigation safety lighting, which will be lit in accordance to the U.S. Coast Guard's private aids to navigation guidance, which includes all turbines having continuous amber flashing lights that are visible up to 5 miles away, nautical miles away. And lastly, looking forward, coming up this summer, Oceanwind will begin pre-construction fisheries monitoring. Through a competitive RFP process, Oceanwind has chosen to partner with Rutgers and Monmouth Universities in New Jersey to conduct these studies. We're finalizing the details of the plan, but once it's complete, we'll begin engagements with agencies and stakeholders and to review and provide feedback on the technical elements. And it's intended for the monitoring plan to be designed comprehensively and place focus on species of commercial and recreational importance to the region. We're pleased to be working collaboratively with local leaders in the fishing industry to execute the monitoring plan. And this multidisciplinary approach intends to include a trawl survey, eDNA sampling, surf plan survey, a multi-method survey for structure-oriented fish species, such as black sea bass, acoustic telemetry monitoring, and oceanic data collection. So finally, I'd like to thank everyone for your time, and sorry for the late day, and the council for inviting us to present our project updates. On the slide, I have our contact information for Ross, Chris, and myself. We're also here to answer any questions now, so I'll pass it back to Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thanks for your presentation. I think we have one more, from what I understand, and then we'll have opportunity for questions from the council.
That was the last one.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. Well, great. Yeah, thank you for your presentation. So we've heard a lot of updates on wind. There's a lot of information there. Let's go to the council to see if anybody has any questions for Brian, Peter, Krista, Ross, and Chris. Tony Delernia, I see your hand up. Go ahead, Tony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a few questions. I think hopefully I'm going to try to be very brief.
Okay, take your time.
My first question is to Brian Hooker. Brian, can you tell me what led to the decisions to eliminate Fairway, the Fairway South and Fairway North wind energy areas?
I think as I had on the slide, it was a lot of it had to do with navigation and buildability, but I don't, is Luke Feinberg, are you on the line to be able to address that more directly?
Yeah, thank you so much for your question.
And I'm sorry, I should have introduced you, Luke. Luke is our project coordinator for the New York Bight leasing process, so he's more familiar with that. So he's a BOEM employee with the project and coordination branch. So sorry, go ahead, Luke.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. So to answer your question, really, the process itself is a combination of many factors, and there's not one thing you'd point to that says that's the reason why an area was removed. So for the fairways, really, it's a combination of things. Number one, I'd say, is being in conflict with U.S. Coast Guard proposed fairways, proximity to shore, fishing activities that are going on there. Specifically regarding fairways south, that is located between two transit lanes, and there is a potential conflict there with maritime traffic that was being considered. I would note that these areas were identified as wind energy areas, so they are areas that could be offered at a later date, but they're not being offered in this proposed sale notice right now. A large part of that too is also the preferences of the states of New York and New Jersey.
Okay, thank you very much. My next question is to Peter Burns. Peter, you mentioned that there's an offshore wind socioeconomic summary impacts summary reports. Can you tell me, are these summary reports used to develop the compensation mitigation plans that are being proposed?
Hi, this is Pete Burns. Thank you for the question, Mr. Delernia. I don't know the answer to that question. I can try to find that out for you.
Okay, well, I guess maybe my question then should go back to perhaps Brian. Is there a national policy regarding the development of the compensation mitigation plans? Is there a formula or a national policy that the developers are required to follow?
Not currently, but I will say that is, BOEM's role in fisheries mitigation kind of writ large, including compensatory mitigation, is something that we're taking a very serious look at. And I think there's been some indication from states. I think there's a recent letter from 8 state governors that requested the BOEM, take a closer look and take a leading role in that. And we're in the process of doing that. So that's where we are now. But there's no national policy currently on fisheries mitigation, including compensation.
So would I be wrong if I said that it appears that currently each developer is required to, or you're using their own guidelines of developing their compensation plans?
No, I think that's correct. I mean, there are some, standards that do exist, from Europe. There's, as far as like how compensation is done, even in the US, regarding gear compensation, there is a model that is, I know has been used. That's the primarily in the Gulf of Mexico, the fisheries, the FCP, the fisheries, it's not called compensation fund, but anyway, I think the one I'm talking about. But so that has a a set standard of how the application works and how gear loss is compensated. And I think there are some other examples around the world, and I think people are looking at those, as would we. So it's not entirely just made up from developer by developer, but it is their policies.
All right, well, thank you. While we're on the topic of national policies, can you tell me, is there a national policy regarding the acoustical surveys that are conducted in the development of, or in the research that the developers use to look at the different wind energy areas? Is there a national policy regarding how those acoustical surveys should be conducted?
We do have guidelines for the conduct of those surveys, like to ensure that that those surveys are conducted in a manner that gets us the information that we can use for our, geotechnical, for our engineering analyses that are done, and also supports our interpretation of benthic habitat. So that, yes, BOEM does have guidelines on how those surveys are conducted, but there are also industry standards that exist as well. They're not entirely prescriptive, but they do inform the what the developer does.
Understood. Thank you. And my final question is to Chris Sarro. Chris, you had mentioned the acreage that was included in the development of the South Fork project. And you said there was only approximately 16 acres or so that of that area is going to be utilized by the wind energy by the turbines themselves. Can you tell me, does that 16 acres also include the scour protection zones around each of the turbines, or is those scour protection zones additional acreage?
Sorry, I just gave a very compelling answer to myself. Yeah, it was the acreage was 32.5 acres, and that is the footprint of the turbine foundations, the scour protection around those turbines, and then any cable protections that are going to need to be used in the lease area.
Very good. Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have at this time, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for the time. Thank you, gentlemen, for answering my questions.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Thanks, Tony, for your questions. Very a lot of good questions, and I'm glad everyone's here to help answer them for you. I'm going to go next to Michelle Duvall, and then Peter Defer. You're on deck. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think just two quick questions, and apologies if these have been answered in some other format or council meeting. I guess the first one to Brian. Brian, you mentioned the simulation study for the trawl survey. Was that it? Is that
Yes.
correct? And I'm assuming that's for, is that to, just determine how the trawl survey is going to be impacted, or how to, maybe, I don't know, John here might know something that might be able to better answer this, for how to make up for the loss of potential stations. Is that what that's about?
Yeah, I'm sure John would love to chime in on it. I mean, I will say that, yeah, it's just it's the first step in that long process of, finding a solution to, to the loss of, not just a loss of a station, but in the statistical design. But if John's on, I'm sure he can give a better answer than I. And he might not be on. I don't know.
Yeah, he might not be on. Thanks. I just wanted to.
Yeah. So in his absence, yeah, it's the first step to go through this observation study, and then I think it identifies what the issues are that and can lead you to what the next steps are to actually, change or adapt the protocol.
And I think I see John with his hand up, so I didn't know if you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I'll add a little bit. I mean, Brian's exactly right. It's a first step to look at the impacts on losing the survey area and the impacts on the statistical design. We would then also sort of incorporate into that, looking at the habitat effects of the structure itself in a simulation sense, and understanding how that would affect sort of the indices coming out of the survey. And then sort of the longer goal would be to then connect the observing system simulation experiment to stock assessments to understand what the decrease in certainty from the survey indices, how that then translates into stock assessments and uncertainties in the stock assessment. Again, so there's a bit of a long process, but this initial plan is to have two workshops to define the components of what would be included in that observing system simulation experiment.
Thanks, John. I appreciate it. And then, Mr. Chairman, my second question, I think, was just to Krista. And again, apologies if this is something that's been answered somewhere else, but just.
You only get one question. You only get one question, Michelle. No, go ahead. I'm just kidding.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
So, Krista, just the compensation fund, that's all funds that the company that Vineyard Wind is putting up. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, those are the compensation plans that have been agreed upon with Rhode Island, Mass, and then the separate fund for the states that didn't have that federal consistency review process.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm done.
All right, thanks, Michelle. And I was just joking with you. You can ask as many questions as you'd like. So next, let's see who we have next. Peter Defer and then Adam Nowalski. Go ahead, Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I ask all the questions I want to? No, I don't think so.
Well, I'll cut you off if it starts to get in the weeds too much, but go for it. Ask
I just have one question for Brian, and that has to do with the nature of the surveys. So what we heard this afternoon was a fairly comprehensive description of a biological survey that incorporated every trophic level pretty much, and a really thorough thing, which I've seen before. But I want to know if that same survey design is required and will be required of all wind turbine development areas. And the reason I ask that is because when I asked for one from the Dominion in Virginia, it was nowhere near as comprehensive. I would have said it was in some ways a mere shadow of what we've seen described today. So, Brian, is there not a standard description of a comprehensive ecological survey that must be undertaken for all pre and in place monitoring activities?
No, there's not. We have guidance on the types of surveys that could be could be utilized to characterize and monitor what the potential impacts are anticipated to be. But we do not prescribe, the surveys that are required for every, for all lessees. They are looked at on a project by project basis. But I think to answer your question more broadly, I think this idea of how we are going to approach fisheries monitoring surveys in the future is I think one of very active discussion, because I think there's a lot of concern that the level of fisheries monitoring that you heard today is not necessarily sustainable across every single project that is going forward. I think it makes sense for some of these initial first starters, but I think there's a real desire to try to look at this more holistically, and that's why we have the Responsible Offshore Science Alliance, I think, is an entity that's really trying to take a look at that and has developed some additional survey methodologies, and then also trying to tackle how would this potentially look in the long run to answer the questions that need to be answered at the scale that's appropriate. So,
thank you, Brian. My concern is that the Dominion has operating pilot turbines with a very incomplete survey system in place. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Peter. John, here, I saw your hand come up. Did you have something specific to this discussion?
Yeah, I do. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I think, Peter, it's an excellent question. I think it's important to sort of distinguish two different types of survey activities. And Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but the work that's being done at Vineyard Wind now is a before-after controlled impact design study, and it's going to go on for the next, I can't remember what it is, 2 or 3 years. So it's a very specific design to understand the impacts of the building of Vineyard Wind in that area. The longer sort of impacts on our long-term surveys is what Brian was getting to. That's an area of active conversation where we are working hard to find, through this work on the bottom trawl survey, work that we're doing with the New England Council on the Scallop survey, trying to address that longer term impacts on the resource surveys that inform stock assessments. And we use the word surveys for both of those, but the purposes of those two efforts are very different.
All right, thanks, John. Appreciate that. Anything else, Peter, before I move on to Adam?
No, thank you very much, and thank you, John.
Okay, thanks for that. All right, I'm going to go next to Adam Nowalski.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Appreciate the updates. With regards to the survey work that is being done and is planned, much of it is planned in the survey in the lease areas themselves and in the immediate vicinity. One of the concerns of fishing communities is with a change in migration patterns, particularly near shore, within a couple miles of the beach and our back bay and tributaries. What study work is planned to account for the fact that we should be studying that to understand what a baseline is, so that if studies show an abundance in the resource in the area of the lease areas themselves, one would jump to the conclusion, well, this is a net positive for the fishing community. But if it's changed those migration habits that's prevented those fish from migrating another 10 to 12 miles inshore, with those near shore coastal areas being much more accessible to a large number of anglers, shore-based anglers, anglers with smaller vessels that can't get 12, 15, 20 miles off the beach. What work is done and what's being planned to account for that potential change in access to the fishing community?
This is Brian. Was that directed to BOEM? I mean, I can.
I would direct that question to anybody here, the developers in particular, to BOEM, to GARFO, anybody involved in the permitting. Again, I think that the aspect of fish abundance is one thing, but relocation of the fish and making them inaccessible to a large number of anglers is a whole nother topic. And I'm not sure from the study work I've seen that we have studies that are planned to be able to account for those impacts.
Sure. I think, I mean, I'll take a very, quick stab at that. So what BOEM requires, or what is looking at very project specific impacts. That's what's included in the construction operations plan. I think what I was alluding to earlier with ROSA and again with NIMS and other agencies is really trying to, I think, get at that more ecological monitoring, that at a higher level monitoring, and how that should look. And I not contradicting John, but there is that effort also, in addition to the fisheries surveys that the Science Center conducts. So there, I don't have there is no specific long-term ecological plan other than what NIMS is already doing with their existing surveys that are looking at trends and and again the Science Center would be better to talk about that, but that's the current framework we're operating under.
If I could follow up.
Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, I think then that the question then is more directed towards the developers then. Do they have anything in the queue for doing this type of assessment, not just within the lease area and within the immediate vicinity, but within the known migratory destinations that these lease areas are in the path of, particularly along our beachfronts?
Hi, this is Krista Bank. I can try to address that a little bit. Your question is valid, and definitely a concern about redistribution of species is a concern, and the developers are definitely supportive of supporting regional type of monitoring or other types of plans to answer some of those other questions that are more on a broader scale than just the project specific questions. So that's about as well as I can answer that at this point. I hope you found that a little helpful.
If I could interject quickly, this is Greg DeSalles. I'm a fishery science specialist over at Ørsted. I wanted to speak to Adam's question. With the ocean wind monitoring plan, what we're intending to do is to use acoustic telemetry to address some of those questions for commercially and recreationally important species. and using acoustic telemetry strategically to understand questions specific to inshore and offshore migratory patterns, something that we've heard as a concern from stakeholders, and we're addressing the monitoring plan. We're designing the monitoring plan to address that. Similarly at South Fork, Chris didn't mention it in his presentation, but we're also working with researchers at Stony Brook and Monmouth University to do some acoustic telemetry along the route of the export cable, specifically in New York State waters. We're going to have a pretty robust acoustic telemetry experiment there over 6 years. And so having telemetry occurring both inshore, where the cable's coming to shore, and also offshore in the lease sites, that will allow us to better understand, migration along the coast as animals pass through the export cable, but also understand connectivity from the lease sites to those inshore areas on the south shore of Long Island and also along the coast of New Jersey.
Okay, thanks for that. Was there any follow-up on that answer?
Was that directed towards me, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah. I mean, was there anything else you wanted to follow up on based on your questions?
No, I appreciate the answers. I'll just simply say I don't think I was overwhelmed, and I think I would just offer that I don't think any of the developers here today are unaware of those inshore concerns. I think the presentation were shown by everyone indicated that there is a directed effort towards research, but I think it's clear that the majority of that research is directed in the vicinity of the lease area. And I do hope that the voices of the inshore anglers that are working to make their voices heard through these outreaches, through the regional councils, that developers, science, everyone involved recognizes that inshore research component of the change in migratory patterns are just as important, if not more so, than the research that's being done in the lease area vicinity. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Adam. And so, Adam, don't go too far. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take one more question from Eric Reed, and then I'm looking at an email from you about something you wanted to bring up while we had the wind folks with us regarding some concerns and possible action by the council in moving forward with in the development of these wind projects. So stay tuned. I'm going to come back to you in a minute regarding the email that you sent to me and Chris, just this morning. So let's go to Eric Reed, and then then Adam, I'm going to come back to you. So Eric Reed, do you have a question or comment that you'd like to make?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. So my question is about survey vessels that are going to be engaged in trawl surveys, in particular in these wind development areas. It's my understanding, and I got a pretty good understanding of it, is that every developer has a different set of criteria to certify a U.S. flagged vessel to conduct those surveys. And not all the developers have different criteria, and some of them are based on international law for vessels that are up to 500 tons inspected vessels. I don't know of any vessels on the East Coast that are in a class bigger than 200 tons uninspected, which is a different thing, but it would be great, and I don't know if there is any attempt or any desire to standardize between developers the qualification, certification criteria for U.S. vessels that actually apply under U.S. law and not international law, which most of these boats, although they are Coast Guard certified, safety inspected, and they operate under U.S. law, it's very hard for them to meet. I mean, it's not insurmountable, but it's not easy. So is there a possibility to standardize the criteria for survey vessels conducting trawl surveys in particular to qualify as acceptable vessels based on under 200 gross tons registered tonnage, uninspected, under U.S. law.
Is there anyone from the panel that could provide Eric that answer? Or is that something that we might need to follow up on at another time?
This is Brian. This is the first time I've heard that question, so I don't have an answer.
Okay, so you're not prepared at this time for an answer?
Hi,
No.
this is Krista Bank here from Vineyard Wind. I don't have a good answer for you, Eric. I do agree that that would be really helpful to have a standard across all developers for the same qualifications, like you said, for vessels under 200 tons. I know there are some standards that the contractors that developer use that may want to stay with their international standards, and that's where I think some of the problems lie. I do know that there is an effort, I believe, I think this is a grant through the Mass Clean Energy Center to try to work on that. It's a grant through the Mass Fishermen's Partnership and the Commercial Fishery Center of Rhode Island to try to work towards that. I don't know how far that effort has gotten. I know developers have shared what our criteria is on that effort, but yeah, personally, I think that would be great. And again, we don't want to create roadblocks for fishing vessels that want to be part of, whether it's research or scouting vessels. So I do think it's something that's needed, but I think it does require more discussion and more coordination. Thanks.
Yeah, if I could just jump in for 2 seconds, and it's unfortunate that the two people on our side that could help out the most aren't here, but I think most people know Ed LeBlanc and Liz Kretovic. I know they're working on our side on vessel standards and getting them to match what we have available here. So if there's any follow-up to it, please just let me know and I can put them on the spot.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate the responses, and some of you have seen my name in lights, I'm sure by now. But my concern is the initial shot at having a vessel inspected really is a deterrent to getting qualified vessels, and more importantly, in my mind, qualified crew. I have boats that I'm working with that really want to do this job, and I think that they deserve to do the job, and they will do a good job for us. But it's a pretty daunting experience for a guy that he can either go fishing or he can try to jump through the hoops, and so far it's about a 50-50 shot who wants to go for the certification or who wants to just say the hell with it, I'm going fishing. So my intention is to try to move this thing along. And I know there's been some effort to standardize it, but it really benefits the developers, the science community, and the industry if this was a standardized effort, standardized certification based on United States Coast Guard regulations and U.S. law, and it doesn't have to apply to international law, which in some cases, your international law requires that a 70-foot steel boat has a gangway to get on and off the dock that's got to be welded to the side of the boat. And I just think that's an extreme example, but they're not insurmountable. But it's very hard to get people who want to go through this effort. And I'm doing my best to help them, but I need a little help. So maybe somebody can help me.
All right, thanks. I mean, Yeah, I can't offer you too much help there, Eric, but maybe our panelists can follow up with you, after the call and try to work with you to resolve the issues that you have. I see Peter Burns' hands up. Peter, did you have something you wanted to follow up with?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If the time's appropriate, I just wanted to circle back on Mr. Delernia's question about the offshore wind summary reports.
Yeah, go for it.
Great, thank you. Yes, I'm sorry I couldn't answer it right away, but I'm not sure how those have been used or whether they were used in developing the mitigation plans for the fishing industry. They weren't designed for that. Those are really based on fishery revenue, based on vessel trip reports. So it doesn't include any kind of shoreside infrastructure or any kind of data like that would be more comprehensive for fisheries losses that might result from wind projects. So not something that was designed for. And also keep in mind that the crab and the lobster fisheries in federal waters don't have a vessel trip reporting requirement. So there are some limitations to the data and being able to, that would limit how it can be used.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Appreciate you looking that information up and getting back to Tony's question. Okay, so we've gone through interested members of the council that had questions regarding the presentations. I do want to follow back up with Adam Nowalski. I got an email from him this morning regarding a two-step approach, regarding concerns that some members of the Mid-Atlantic have had. So without, let me just look at this. So Adam, I'm going to turn to you. If there's anything you'd like to do regarding the email that you sent me and Chris this morning, we're happy to engage in that at this point. But I'll turn to you, Adam, to see what your thoughts are. If you want to give us a little background and some possible direction.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I don't want to steal anyone's thunder here, but ultimately I'll speak for a minute or two, and then I'm going to turn to Scott Lennox because I've got to give him the credit for having brought this to our attention here. A couple of weeks ago, the council received an email from Dr. Moore that was originally received from Chris regarding some work that was done by Captain Monty Hawkins out of Ocean City, Maryland. Captain Hawkins has been very involved with habitat work over the years. And one of the things that he referenced in his email was the impacts of subacoustic bottom profiling survey work and the impact that had on the behavior of fish, in particular, causing them to stop feeding. In that document, Captain Hawkins was, in addition to being able to document some recent experiences that way, he was also able to pinpoint a specific time in the past with another research vessel and another research captain that he was able to basically have that captain turn that gear on and off and was able to identify some change in habits. Now, I think that that's a far stretch from a comprehensive research. I think we've certainly heard about a lot more detailed research here, but I will say that that story has been augmented by some anecdotal stories. I've heard some regional fishermen here in New Jersey. For those that don't know, I am working with Atlantic Shores as a recreational fisheries representative, so I do get those phone calls, do work with our fisheries liaison, Kevin Wark, on those issues. So after that email, I had the opportunity to have conversation with a number of people on the council, including Mr. Delernia, who's also very involved in wind, with Scott directly, who brought this issue forward, Paul Risi, another recreational interest here. And we all thought that, number one, we had concerns about that work and what the impacts might be. And perhaps there's an opportunity here to work with developers and that gear later this year so that it does not impact our fall sea bass fishery at a time when most of our summer flounder seasons have ended, prior to striped bass and tautog seasons getting started. Black sea bass is the primary fish that gets targeted during that time frame. And then beyond that, I think there's a place either for council staff, the science center, the developers, to work to gather whatever work has been done previously with regards to the impacts and changes on fish behavior from specifically the subacoustic bottom profiling gear. And based on what that collection of information yields, either identifies that that's a gap in research we need to do, or whether it provides some direction forward. So I probably already stole way too much of, again, what I have to credit Mr. Lennox for having bringing forward. So I think I'd like to turn to him for further description of what he brought forward, any more conversation he's had, and if he's got a recommended path forward beyond what I laid out here.
Yeah, Adam, I'd say you robbed Scott, but that's okay. I'm sure Scott's going to have something else to offer, but I think it's all really good information. So, go ahead, Scott, if you have something you want to add to Adam's comments.
Can I just say ditto here? I mean, that was Adam. You didn't steal my thunder. We've been having these conversations, and I really appreciate you moving forward. This my original intention was just to send Captain Monty's email to the council so that we could get it on the radar because of some of the things that he's actually seen out on the ocean. My biggest concern arose from part of the email that said that this year he's starting to notice it again whenever the sub-bottom profilers are turned on. He's noticing a difference in the habitat, or excuse me, of the feeding habits of the sea bass. But the bigger concern came from some same thing happened between a time frame of 2013 to 2015 when the profilers were off of our coast pretty much for the entire course of those 3 years, periodically here and there. And in the spring of 2015, when he thought that sea bass fishing should be really, really good, he couldn't get a bite inshore. And he attributed that to the fact that over the course of time, the bottom profiling that was being done, he thinks those fish, I think with good evidence, he thinks those fish decided just not to come as close to shore as usual because of what they would expect another year in a row. Now, those fish have come back. Sea bass fishing off of our coast is really good this year, but I think there's some weight to what Captain Monty is saying in his email. And I just think it's time, to get it on the radar, maybe have some research done on the fact he seems to voice a little frustration with the fact that some entities tell him that it's just not true what he's seeing. But I seem to put I put a lot more weight into the fact that he's out there pretty much 200 plus days a year. And when he notices something like that so directly to the point that he calls the vessel to find out if they've got the equipment on or off, I think he's doing his due diligence there. So after speaking with Adam and talking to Monty, we wondered if it would be pertinent for council to send a letter, maybe draft a letter to all the offshore wind developers requesting that, like Adam said, maybe this fall, for a couple of months, they turn them off, just basically to give us a break off the mid-Atlantic coast. And, if they decide to do that, great. If not, at least we've got it on record from the council, saying that we made this request, and then, we can go from there and see what happens.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Scott. So, the discussion and I guess yours and Adam's comments are more action related rather than just a comment. So let me ask staff, maybe Chris, does a comment, can council produce, do we have enough information in our habitat policy to produce a letter like that to the wind developers, or does it need something more formal from as a motion from the council?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do have a policy that we could use to draft a letter. Certainly, given the conversation we're having now, if folks want, Julia and I could work with Scott and Adam to put a draft together that we could then get out to the council for them to look at. And if folks have a problem with it, then obviously they could provide us with some edits, or just tell us that the letter is no good and not to send it out. But I think we could work through our usual process to get a draft letter approved. But yeah, we do have a policy we can use as well for the basis of the letter.
Okay.
All right.
But you'd be comfortable working with Scott and Adam in developing a letter and then sending it out to the council?
Yeah, we probably Julia would be the principal involved in that. But yeah, we'll do it.
Okay. Yeah. How does that sound? Scott, Adam, does that sound like a plan? I mean, I'm going to ask the council if anyone objects in a second, but is that what you were looking for today as part of this discussion?
Yeah, Mike, after my conversations with Adam, we were looking for, we kind of narrowed it down to a specific time frame. But if there's a policy already in place where Chris and staff can put something together and then send out to the rest of the council for approval or disapproval, that's great with me. I think just, running this up the flagpole and seeing what they come back with is going to be more valuable than anything at this point. And then maybe some research can be done in the future. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And Scott, just, on that, the policy that I spoke of is very general. I think if there are details regarding timeframes for when you're going to be asking these companies to turn their I don't even know what you want to call it, the sub-bottom profiler acoustics off, that would be more specific, and that would be something that you and Adam can work with Chris and Julia on to put in that letter. But I'm comfortable with that. Before we go any further, well, I've got a couple hands. Let me take a couple questions, and then I'm going to ask the council if there's any objection to working on a letter to the wind developers, in the vein that Adam and Scott have spoken to. But I'm going to start with Kate Wilkie, and then Tony DeLerny. You'll be up next. Go ahead, Kate.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks to Scott and Adam for bringing this up. I've been pretty concerned reading all the writings from Captain Monty for a long time now. So I'm glad we're going to write this letter, and I think that it should also go to maybe BOEM and NIMS and not just the developers. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for that comment. Tony DeLernia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to put these statements on the record. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to have to recuse myself from the development of this letter or from a vote to send it out or not to send it out. My position with NYSERDA in New York State is one of which I am expected to act in a informational position rather than an advocate for or against wind. And so while I understand what's being said here, I will have to recuse myself from the development of this letter at this time. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Tony, I appreciate that. Thanks for being up front with us on that. John Hare, and then I have Anna Beckwith after John. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It's an excellent question. Thank you for raising. We had the synthesis of the science workshop that Rhoda led in October, and NYSERDA also had a synthesis of a science workshop earlier in the year too. So we can go back and look at those two sort of as they're putting together the proceedings from those two and see how much information there is on that question. And the other thing that I can offer is, the United States is involved in the ICES working group on offshore wind and fisheries, and we can go to our European colleagues and ask how much information there is on that topic from the developments in Europe. So, if you send a copy of that letter to me, Mr. Chair, to NIMS, we can sort of take those actions and then get back to the council with what we're able to find out.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. Thanks, John. We can certainly do that. I appreciate the comment. So coming to us from a much more beautiful place than my basement, which I'm sitting in right now. Anna Beckwith, I think. Anna, did I hear that you're in Costa Rica right now?
I am. I am. If I sent you a picture of where I was sitting, I'd make everyone angry.
I'm sitting in my basement. It's 50 degrees downstairs. I got a blanket on my legs because it's so cold. Trying to keep quiet and keep the kids from disturbing me during these meetings. But yeah, Anna, thank you for offering some thoughts as our South Atlantic Council liaison. So go ahead if you have comments you want to make.
Yeah, I do. I was just thinking about when we had received similar presentations in the South Atlantic. One of the concerns that we had voiced was, of course, some of our snapper grouper species are pretty specific to their particular rocks and their home territory, and they typically we had listed some concerns about not necessarily them choosing to flee an area where some of these surveys would be going above, and potential damage to not only their feeding habitats, but their hearing, and also their spawning habitats. I mean, their spawning behavior. So I did note that you guys were discussing changes to feeding behavior, but I haven't heard really any concerns about changes to spawning behavior. And I was more curious if you guys don't have any species that overlap with the spawning season when these surveys are taking place, or if this is just not something that you guys have really sort of focused a particular concern on. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you and Monty Hawkins would probably, if you haven't spoken to Monty before, he has a whole lot of ideas about spawning. I don't have an answer for you on that, but I saw Scott Lennox's hand come up. Scott, did you have something you wanted to offer on that question from Anna?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think the only thing I was thinking about was the fact that I'm sure Monty and I and others are concerned with those topics that you brought up. The only reason that we're bringing this to the attention of council is because he's actually got documentation on the feeding habits changing while he's fishing. I think it would take a lot more research to find out whether it's affecting the spawning patterns of the fish or anything like that. But at least this puts it on the radar.
Gotcha. Thanks for that clarification.
All right, thanks, Scott. I appreciate that. And thanks, Anna, for your question. Adam Nowalski, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you again. So I certainly understand Tony's position, and I'm certainly not privy to whatever contractual agreements he's under. Let me just say, from my perspective of having what I perceive as a very good working relationship with the developer I'm working with, Atlantic Shores, just north of the Ocean Wind project here in New Jersey. They're not with us for this call, at least not as a presenter today. I have discussed this with them. They are running the idea up the chain. And what I really think this is I don't think that this is necessarily a pro or anti-wind stance. What I think this is an example of the fishing community and management being willing to work with the developers. I think the fishing community could be standing outside development headquarters waving flags, stop the surveying now, stop the surveying now. That's not what we're doing here. I think what's being discussed about potentially pursuing something for later this year, it's happening in a very transparent manner, this discussion, while the developers are here with us today, virtually at least. It's happening in a manner that provides some lead time, and I think that we're setting forth a direction where we want to collect information, and again, it's about how we can work together moving forward. So I don't really view this as a pro or anti-wind position we're taking. We recognize the development is going on, as Scott mentioned. I don't think Anna's off base with her concerns about spawning as well, but as Scott mentioned, we've got something very specific and tangible backed up by some additional anecdotal information that we're hearing as well. So I think it's a reasonable step forward, and I'm glad to hear that we don't have to do this through motions and debates, and we've got an an avenue forward, and
Yeah.
hope we can continue to leverage those avenues moving forward collaboratively, not in a pro versus anti perspective.
Right, right. No, I agree with you, Adam. I think that's where we are. Let me ask Julia and Chris, do you need more information at this point? Do you think you guys have enough to work with to draft a letter at this time based on the conversation we've had plus the email from Adam that was sent to both of us?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think Julia had to step away. Julia, are you there? No. So I'll speak for both of us. The answer is yes. Yeah, the answer is yes. Yeah, we have it done.
Okay. All right. So let me ask the council just to make this official. Adam and Anna, if you can put your hands down, just to make this official. There you go. Okay. Is there any objection to my direction based on the comments to staff for developing a letter that we can review before it goes out to the developers as well as the service, both the Science Center and Garfo? I think everyone should be included in whatever it is that we put together based on the conversation we had today. Is there any objection? All right, seeing no objection, Chris, I want to put that on you to follow through with that with Julia and work with Adam and Scott on details of that letter, and then we can all review it and it can go out from there. So I appreciate your willingness to work with us on that. Thank you. And you said Julia stepped away. Is there anything else, Chris, that you can think of that needs to come before the council at this time on, regarding offshore wind updates?
Nope. I think we're done.
I think we're good.
Yep.
Okay. Is there anybody on the council that has anything they want to bring up before we adjourn? All right, seeing no hands. Thank you all for your time today. I'm sorry we went over our time limitations again, but these are important discussions, and I wanted to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to participate. I want to thank the panel from our wind folks. Thank you all for spending the last hour and a half with us, answering questions and providing us the details within your presentation. So thanks again for that. And I will go ahead and call this meeting adjourned. We will be on recess until tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, where we will be meeting. I believe we're not meeting jointly, Chris, right? With the policy board. It's just going to be a review of the policy board decision on Black Sea Bass, right?
Yeah, just us.
Okay, it's just us. So we'll reconvene at 9 o'clock. I hope you guys all have a great evening, and thank you all for your time and your participation today. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're in recess till 9 o'clock. Thanks.